Reading YouTube, fascism marches on. Anti-protest bills would attack right to speak out under the Jester King. The ACLU says more than 30 bills have been introduced amid a huge swell of activism promoting UN intervention over criminalization of peaceful protests. More than 20 states have proposed bills that would crack down on protests and demonstrations since the Jester King was elected, in a move that UN experts have branded incompatible with US obligations under international human rights law. Proposed laws would variously increase the penalties for protesting in large groups, ban protesters from wearing masks during demonstrations, and in some states, protect drivers from liability if they strike someone taking part in a protest, which is not a hypothetical. It has already happened. So don't try that. Well, that hasn't happened. No one would do that. Yes, they have. And these laws would help protect them from liability for having done that. And you might be asked, well, why would a protester want to wear a mask? Remember what age we live in, where if you get someone's image, you can use that image to figure out who they are, and then to dox them, to swat them, to hunt down their place of business and ruin their chances of being employed. So wanting to anonymize who you are in public in a protest is a survival tool in some cases. And it should be preserved. If you are in public and you want to wear a mask, you should be allowed. If someone says you cannot wear a mask on my private property, alrighty, that's private property. But if you're in public and you want to wear a mask, you should be allowed to do so, just as you should be allowed to wear a headscarf of any variety if you want to do so. If you're in public, no one can stop you, at least until these laws are put into place. The large crowds, of course they don't want large crowds. They want to minimize the fact that these protests are taking place. They want to downplay it. And one of the ways they can do that is by saying, well, the number of protesters was small and we can easily ignore them, as opposed to, say, some of the biggest protests there have ever been when the Women's March took place the day after the election of Feces Rex. So yeah, they don't want those to exist. He cannot tolerate the concept that not everyone loves him. His ego is so large, it requires constant stoking. And if it doesn't, well, maybe it'll just peter out. He'll be forced to stare into a mirror and see himself for what he is. And he really, really doesn't want to do that. So these are all disturbing. The idea that people are taking away the rights of protesters. Now, at the moment, a lot of these protesters, most of these protesters, are of the progressive variety. Of course, the anti-protesters are of the conservative set. But remember, these laws would be on the books for the next time there is a progressive person in power, if that next time ever happens again, if the United States, in fact, survives the administration of the Jester King. But every American should be against this because these things are violations of our First Amendment. The right to gather in crowds, the right to speak freely, the right to express ourselves as we see fit with signs and with masks and what have you. All of these are freedoms of expression. And when they're in the public square, they should be protected. And anyone who wants to curtail that, particularly to stoke the ego of a narcissistic, megalomaniacal madman like our current president, well, maybe we should take a long, hard look at that.